Some 60 years before the Battle of Yavin, a journeyman protector named Jaster Muriel was exiled from Concord Dawn due to a murder judged by the reigning government as unjust. Jaster found redemption as Mandalore the Reformer, founding the true Mandalorian faction, who followed new codes of honor outlined in Jaster's Super Commando Codex. The Codex was based on the Tong Shadow Warriors' original canons of honor, modernized by Jaster to combine Journeyman Protector values with practical Mandalorian sensibilities. Thus, the Mandalorian Super Commandos served as highly paid, honorable mercenaries. Their movement garnered popularity across both the long-term residents of the homeworld Mandalore and the scattered Mandalorian clans operating independently across the galaxy. The pacifist New Mandalorians held little sway over the reunited warrior factions, but the real threat to the true Mandalorians was the splinter group calling themselves the Death Watch. Under Tor Vizsla, the Death Watch advocated for a return to their Crusader and Neo-Crusader roots of galactic conquest, to become a worthy rival to the likes of the Jedi and the Republic once more. Many extremist Mandalorians legitimately wanted to follow Vizsla's cultural revival instead of Jaster's, but in reality, Vizsla only desired to gather himself a sycophantic following of lawless marauders, accountable to no authority other than their own. Still, Vizsla's cult of personality was strong enough to oppose Jaster. As a sign of solidarity, devoted watchmen adopted masks and helmet designs modeled after the original Mandalorian Crusaders and Tong Shadow Warriors, whereas the Super Commandos donned updated shock trooper armor, popularized by Mandalore the Uniter during the new Sith Wars. Before long, the Mandalorian Civil War breaks out. Pushed back by the Death Watch, Jaster and his closest followers are forced into a retreat on Concord Dawn, barely escaping a bloody coup. Jaster's successor in the Journeyman Protectors is Ambu Fett, a descendant of Clan Fett, and although he and his family are not Mandalorians, they provide shelter to the Super Commandos on their farmstead. Unfortunately, Vizsla and his watchmen follow Jaster's trail and discover 8-year-old Jango Fett. With Jango as a hostage, the watchmen torture the boy's father to learn Jaster's current whereabouts. Jango's mother, Jimmy Fett, shoots one of the watchmen, sparking a firefight that allows Jango to flee into the crop fields. Jaster saves Jango from Vizsla's pursuing henchmen, but the boy's mother and father are murdered. Vizsla has the field set on fire and assumes Jaster to be lost in the flames. When Vizsla leaves to host a premature celebration for the Death Watch's victory, Jango leads the true Mandalorians to safety. With nowhere else to go, Jango helps them ambush the Watchmen. His people torn apart by the aggressive reprisal, now it is Vizsla who goes on the run. Jango also makes his first kill, one of the men personally responsible for torturing and killing his family. Unbeknownst to Jango, his older sister Arla Fett is taken captive by the Death Watch and indoctrinated as one of their members. Ignorant of his blood family's survival, Jango is adopted by Jaster as his son, as per the custom of Mandalorians taking war orphans under their care. Naturally, Jango is brought up as a loyal true Mandalorian, who grows to love and respect Jaster as a father. Mandalorian tradition allows children at the age of 13, or the equivalent for those of a non-human species, to be tested on their martial strength, military knowledge, and survival skills in a rite of passage. If they pass, then the child, while generally still subservient to their parents and clan chieftain, is commonly granted the same rights and expectations as an adult, a holdover from historical Mandalorian warriors dying young. Jaster's Super Commando Codex still allows for teenagers to prove their mettle on the battlefront, so at age 14, Jango is given command of his own squad for a mission on the planet of Korda 6. Jango's grunts, including starry-eyed soldier Silas, put their full trust in their new squad leader, but he is not without his detractors. Montross, a veteran Super Commando, believes Jaster to be too biased in his treatment of Jango. Montross never fully embraced Mandalorian traditions either, thinking Jango's lack of blood relation to Jaster should be a factor diminishing their bond as father and son. A fighter who loves the thrill of a good battle, and seizing victory over a thoroughly beaten foe. Montross is not a warrior without his own merits, but his craving for violence leads to his downfall on Korda 6, and costing the Mandalorians a beloved leader. The true Mandalorians are given false intelligence regarding their rescue mission on the planet. A hostile force, more trained and well armed than what is expected, inflicts early casualties against the Mandalorians. Ambitious and arrogant Montross recklessly charges against the enemy instead of following orders to regroup. Jaster saves him, but separated from their comrades, the two are soon cornered by Tor Vizsla and the Death Watch, who arrange this trap on Korda 6 for their hated enemies. Vizsla's rivalry with Jaster became all the more personal after his face was ridden with burn scars from their last encounter on Concord Dawn. Montross betrays Jaster and leaves him behind to be gunned down by the Watchmen. Jango witnesses his father's brutal execution, himself saved from blast fire by Silas. In his final moments, Jaster is held by Jango, and his armored body is carried away by Jango to be honored in a proper ceremony. Montross tries to assume power as Jaster's successor, but the true Mandalorians collectively agree to follow young Jango instead. Exiled by Jango from the Mandalorian people, Montross warns the teenage Mandalore, "You'll kill them all, Fett." Hardened by losing a second father in one lifetime, Jango disregards the words of a traitor and accepts his new title and the responsibilities that come with it. Under Jango, the true Mandalorians continue to uphold the tenets of the Super Commando Codex as wandering mercs. Growing into adulthood, Jango wears armor styled after his mentors. He gains a new confidant and close friend in a fellow Mandalorian, Miles. However, whereas Jaster Muriel is remembered for his strict moral code and reformist principles, Jango's reign is marked by his burning personal vendetta against the Death Watch. 8 years after Jaster's death, Jango and his followers work a job on the planet of Galidraan to learn where they may find Tor Vizsla and finally end him. A master of subterfuge and deception, Vizsla collaborates with the governor of Galidraan to frame the true Mandalorians for the unlawful murder of political dissidents. Jango and his commandos technically did so, while contracted by the governor to eliminate armed rebels resisting his rule, but the slaughter of unaffiliated civilian women and children by the Death Watch helps portray the Super Commandos as perfect stereotypes of Mandalorian brutes needing to be put down. In response to the reports of such savagery, a team of 20 Jedi Knights and Padawans is sent to subdue the threat. Leading the Jedi contingent is Master Dooku. When Dooku later becomes a Sith and records his private recollections on Galidraan, he will note how the task force was hastily drawn from Jedi agents already geographically close to the planet. Not enough Jedi skilled in combat or knowledgeable in the ways the Mandalorians were sent on this assignment. The possibility of a ruse framing the true Mandalorians, who by all accounts were professional soldiers, did not come into consideration by Dooku or his peers until after the damage was already done. However, the true Mandalorians were duty-bound to follow whatever path Jango set them on, and Jango in his lust for revenge led him to reject any chance of peace with the Jedi. On Galidraan, Master Dooku and the Jedi stand before the true Mandalorians, with lightsabers drawn, demanding their surrender. Jango orders his men to open fire on the Jedi. A bloody battle ensues. Explosive ordnance and blaster bolts kill or maim Jedi warriors, and decapitated Mandalorian heads roll when the Jedi slice them off with their sabers. Jango watches Miles get cut in half by one dexterous Jedi, who soon faces Jango in single combat amid a snowy battlefield littered with corpses. Of the 20 Jedi, 11 are killed, at least 3 of them confirmed slain by the bare hands of Jango Fett. Jango lives on as the sole Super Commando survivor in the massacre. Dooku's Padawan at the time, Komari Vosa, personally eliminated 20 Mandalorians, and is praised for her efficient performance by Dooku, but privately, Dooku is far from satisfied by how things played out. It will be some time later when Dooku will learn the truth of the Death Watch deceiving the Jedi. At the current moment, with Jango in his custody, Dooku defies his personal want to let Jango walk free, and instead follows orders from the Jedi Council. Jango is given to the Galidraan governor. Outside the purview of the Jedi, Jango is sold into slavery, and the true Mandalorian movement is finally broken. The removal of the true Mandalorians and the disappearance of the reigning Mandalore, Jango Fett, leaves the political environment in Mandalorian space heavily unstable. The extremist Death Watch hopes this is their chance to assert their rule and attain the resources and manpower necessary to begin their promised conquest of the galaxy. However, the infighting has not yet stopped. The great clan wars between traditional Mandalorian warriors, proponents of the Super Commando Codex, mercenaries without regard to following any codes of ethics, and the shunned new Mandalorians begin tearing their home sector apart. Despite his victory over Jango, Tor Vizsla lacks the social influence and political acumen to settle inter-clan disputes, or effectively present his worth as the new openly ruling Mandalore. In all likelihood, Tor Vizsla may not have been invested in actually becoming Mandalore. Beyond his comparatively small splinter faction, the Death Watch was always a means to satisfy his own petty grudges and sadistic desires. With his grudges against Jester Muriel and Jango Fett settled, Vizsla presumably prefers enjoying a life of indulgence, with no plans to restore order and unity to the Mandalorian people. Meanwhile, Jango suffers for years aboard a spice transport under the ownership of cruel slave masters. Nevertheless, Jango's spirit never breaks. When pirates attack the spice freighter, Jango frees himself of his shackles and renews his quest for vengeance. Except, Jango's mission is stalled for a time, after meeting young freelance pilot Sheikah Tull. With his people massacred under his command, Jango keeps himself closed off from forming many other attachments. But Sheikah is one exception. She had no expectations of Jango, as Jaster's legacy destined to end the great clan wars, or as a hardened warrior defined by his regrets and consumed by the need to rectify them. To Sheikah, he is a reticent Concordian who proves to be a reliable partner, and a genuine human being underneath his cold exterior. In another life, they could have spent the rest of their lives together. But a year after their first meeting, circumstances surrounding the destruction of their ship in a dramatic space battle leads to their separation. Sheikah never saw Jango Fett again. Meanwhile, Jango returns to Galidraan, where he reclaims his old Mandalorian armor, recolored and upgraded by the same governor who betrayed the true Mandalorians. The governor remains in contact with the Death Watch, and directs Jango to the Corellian system, where Jango ambushes Tor Vizsla's personal starship, the Death Rattle. Jango causes the total destruction of the ship, sparse survivors barely saving themselves in escape pods. Landing on Corellia's surface, Jango and Vizsla engage in a final battle. During their duel, Vizsla infects Jango with a strain of poison, only enough to incapacitate him and let Vizsla land the killing blow. In response, before he loses consciousness, Jango makes a long, bloody cut along Vizsla's stomach, which spurs the predatory instincts of indigenous dire cats nearby observing the fight. The wild animals pounce on Vizsla, who does not survive the mauling. Catching the scent of poison in Jango's system, the dire cats spare him. The next day, young children who come upon Jango help resuscitate him. Jango observes the remains of Vizsla's corpse with a grim satisfaction before walking away.